Ecclesiastes chapter 11. In verse 7 and 8, the teacher of Ecclesiastes wrote, "Light is sweet and it's pleasant for the eyes to see the sun." So if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. And it is. I mean, we could all have walked outside and we could have worshiped God, and that would have been wonderful. Do it out in the sun. We came close to that during the beginning of the COVID days. We'd go over to the Fontenot's and we'd go over to the Axes and we'd open up the big doors or be outside, and that's wonderful. And it is beautiful to see the sun, but he's talking about more than the sunlight. He's talking about life, right? So when you wake up and you have life, this is good. And he says, and if you have lots of it, right? Because even so, like, life doesn't guarantee that. Rejoice in it, because the days of darkness, they're many. The teacher of Ecclesiastes, what he's doing, he's talking about the complexity of life. One thing for sure, he says that whenever you take God out of the picture, it is depressing and without rhyme and reason. But of course, put God back into the picture and things are a lot better. But there's another layer of Ecclesiastes, and the teacher seems to be saying, but even having said that, life it's vanity is the word that he keeps using. And within that word, the idea is that it's momentary, it's fleeting, but it's also puzzling. So even whenever God is in the picture, the teacher's saying, I can't always make perfect sense of it. It's an enigma, if you will. And there are good approaches to life. Like, should I be a fool or a wise man? Well, yeah, definitely be a wise man, for example. But even having said that, he said, being wise doesn't mean that things always go the way that they should be. Time and chance happen to all. And so he lays out his whole case and reality of life. And then at the end, he decides to sum it up with coming back to give it to the teacher, death. So we're going to talk about death now. But before we do that, we're going to talk about the youth. And so for the youth, and I'll let you put yourself in that category, this one's for you. But I do want to also look at the parental or the older figure point of view as well. 3 things that the teacher's going to point out for the youth: rejoice, remove, and remember. And we'll see what he's talking about. So here we are, and we're in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 9. Teacher wrote, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment." Just for my own sake, I'm going to look at some of the youth. How's life going right now? Seeing some smiles? Yeah, good. Okay, he says, rejoice in the days of your youth. I did want to give you the New American Standard. Coincidentally, someone recently asked me, whenever the Bible uses the term youth, what age range is that? And here's the fun answer. I don't know. Context will tell. Yay. How many times do I tell you that? Context many times will tell. We do have, so the New American, it'll address it as young man, childhood, young manhood. This isn't neglecting females, but it's wrapping up principles in it. And what it's doing is it's spanning the time from childhood, boyhood, girlhood, into young adulthood, okay? He has all of this in mind. Now the ESV reads, it says, "Let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth, walk in the ways of your heart and the sighs of your eyes." The New American says, "Follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes." The youth, you can thank me right now, because you can finally go to your parents and say, "I found the passage that says that I can follow my heart, Mama." And not only that, the New American's going to do you one better. The impulses of your heart. Have you ever heard that expression, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is? So, pump the brakes, young one. What is he saying and what is he not saying? It's kind of like, you remember whenever Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are profitable for me. Does he mean literally everything he can do is lawful? No, he's talking about, he's assuming that his audience understands within the things that are allowable, lawful by God. All those things that God has allowed are just that. They're lawful for me, but that doesn't mean that every liberty that I have, it's always good to exercise that, because for the time being, it may not be profitable for me. And so when he's doing this, and notice the New American says, the impulses of your heart, the ESV says the way of your heart, the way, the path, okay? He is not saying that whatever you want to do in life, no matter what it is, do it. In fact, many people, I believe they're off on their interpretation. They think that he's using irony here. He's being sarcastic. But I don't think he is. I think he is really telling young people, now is the time, seize it. I believe that. It is an absolute blessing from God. Now is the time. Take advantage. Whenever Solomon said, he says this in Ecclesiastes, he says, do not say, why were the former years better? He says, because it's not of wisdom that you say this. You got to understand that he's speaking from a certain context. But there is absolutely a way in which we can look back at this time, and there is a sense in which it was better. You know, it's better whenever you don't know sin. You know that? It's better whenever you've not felt the gravity and evil in the world. You know what I mean? And you're in that right now. What is it that you love? What is it that you rejoice in? Now, I do want to give a disclaimer. Listen, I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but you know that this is not all about me, myself, and I, okay? And also what this doesn't mean, and I'm sorry, young brothers, but this doesn't mean that if you're, wanting to play 10 hours of video games every day, and mom and dad say, hey, get out of the den, and you're like, well, the preacher said, don't pull me into that. Listen, there's deeper things, and also keep in a context of who is he talking to. Many times in America, we're going to read this and we're going to think about all just little entertainment things that I want to do in life. It's a whole lot deeper. He's writing this long ago to an Israelite audience, who many times boys and girls were a lot more mature, can I just say that, earlier on, and had a lot more responsibility. So I want to be clear also to the parents so you don't kill me afterwards. That's not gone over my head, and I want to be clear. But yet, here you are, and the world is before you. But the thing is that Solomon also says, that the teacher says, but know that God's there. And he's not meaning that to scare you. That's not the point. What he says, and again, get your eyes on it, but know that for all the things that God will bring you into judgment. Whenever your mother and your father are good to you and they bless you in a certain way, you know that they're aware of what's going on. What do you do with those blessings and those abilities? And so that's what he's trying to say to the young people. A really simple question. What do you, young people, those in your youth, what do you rejoice in today? And I sincerely mean this. I really hope you've got something. Parents. The teacher's not addressing the parents. But the flip side of this, I was thinking, be careful not to guilt or burden them during this time. Be the rock. Again, I'm aware that in different cultures, kids are have more responsibilities, but you know what I'm talking about. There are things that you want for your kids. There are desires that you have for them. But would you agree with me? Let them be youthful. Don't burden them with your fears. Don't burden them if you have a lack of confidence in God and this freedom given to them. Don't project that on them. This is the time for them to enjoy. Y'all, level with me for a moment. My oldest is only 10 years old. But those of you who have had kids and have kids that are older, you know what I mean when I say this. You know that look of innocence in their eyes? That look that kids have? It's that look. And it's not only innocence. It's just that look that everything is exciting, everything is big, everything is wonderful. Even whenever they get angry, it's kind of funny because it's in their little dramatic world. It's just, everything is big. I know that whenever they get older, that look is going to be gone. One of you, and I hope I wouldn't even reference this if I didn't feel like I could. I won't say the name, but one of you, you're coming into another stage of this, and you're coming for sure out of childhood into young manhood. And recently, you were just sad for a little bit. And you were very kind in sharing this with me. And I said, it's because you know you're leaving this, you're coming into manhood now. And you said that's exactly what it is. It's a beautiful thing, but it's hard to say goodbye. I suppose that our elderly have an easier time welcoming heaven because they've had more opportunities to say goodbye to people in stages in life. Amen? Man, don't rush that for them. Don't rush that. Encourage them. Now, there's two extremes to this, right? Encourage them. Know what it is that they're good at. Know what it is that they love. Know what it is that they rejoice in. Now, here's the thing. Not everything your kid does, and I'm filtering this for myself, is gold. Not every thought, idea, behavior that my kids have is gold. Listen, Joel was talking about in his class this morning, too much honey. Well, it's just that. It's too sweet. And the thing is that if you're not realistic with them and if you're not helping them, then here's the thing. You treat them like that, and then once they get older, the world's not going to treat them like they're his or her mama. They're expecting them to be realistic, okay? So I'm not saying let's just be pie in the sky, silly about this thing. So have some honesty with them. But here's the other thing, be helpful. You know, son, daughter, this is where God has blessed you. This is something that is good. Here's a road that I think will be really good. Not what mom and dad want for you, but here's where I think you excel. Because here's the thing, a kid that doesn't have a place ends up finding themselves in a very dark place. And so as they're in this stage of rejoicing, let's help them out, yeah? And then he says in verse 10, so that's rejoice, but he also says remove. Remove what? Well, he says remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, and youth and the dawn of life are vanity. For youth and the dawn of life are vanity. Remove. So I'm going to start with the parents this time. I'm going to give you the New American Standard and the New King James. The New American Standard says remove, instead of vexation, it says grief and anger. The New King James says remove sorrow. It goes on and says put away evil from your flesh. And I think that also helps us to understand what he's talking about in that latter portion. Now, why would a young person, what has a young person got to worry about? Sorrow, grief, anxiety? What are you talking about? Yeah, well, young people, let me tell you, they many times know something about that. Well, it's their own doing. It can be, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But many times in life, whenever you have someone in that stage and they're experiencing things like grief, anger, and sorrow, it's been my experience that that's coming from home. It's not normal for someone of that age to have all those things. So where's it coming from? That's one of the questions that I have. Can I say something right now? I got to say something to you. I was texting with John earlier this week. It's funny. I was listening to some study music as I was putting this together. This one hit home for me. I was several times in Starbucks. I was having to really hold back tears, and I was really feeling good about this one. I was telling John, I felt like maybe we're striking gold. I told Jordan about the lesson I did, and she's like, yeah, it's good. Let me say something. And Solomon would back me up on this. There are many times things that you want for your kids that you wanted to protect them from, and God would say, and that's right, we want to protect them from them at this age. And things happen that are out of your control. The sun, it just gets a little darker for them, too young of an age. God bless you. And here's the thing, you don't need to feel guilty about that. I'm not talking to you, okay? If we don't rightly divide and get the stuff right, then the wrong person is going to take the wrong message home. I'm not talking to you. And let me also say, and I've seen this, that whenever the sun darkens for little boys and girls, God brings His sun into their lives and brightens it up. So you keep the faith. Okay, but let me say this. For those who have control, one of the reasons why kids are suffering is because of marriages that are struggling. Yeah, we can go to the obvious, the separation of marriage, but we have people that are living together, but they're not acting like they're in a covenant relationship with one another. And kids are sharp, and they pick up on this stuff, and this brings anger and sorrow and vexation into their lives. Brethren, we gotta protect the innocence of our youth. Our finances. Listen, there's a proverb that talks about, I think it's Proverb 30. Check me on that one. But it talks about, I don't want to be rich, I don't want to be poor. I want to be right in the middle in that sweet spot. Right? And that's hopefully where you're at. But here's the thing. God bless you if you're struggling. But your kiddos don't need to know, if at all possible, okay, you hear me on that, because that's not possible for all people. But that burden doesn't need to be on them. Mom or dad, on the flip side, we don't need to have a love of money. We don't need to put that into their lives. Here's something else. Parenting is for the parents, not the children. I'm going to confess, I'm young. I'm only 38 next month, okay? But I feel like an old man when I say this, like an old curmudgeon right now. These kids these days, but there's something sometimes that's happening, and I don't know if I'm going crazy. So I've asked those older than me, much older than me, am I going crazy, or does it seem like this generation in particular seems to be having a know-it-all mentality and don't like authority? And I've had them say, you're not going crazy. There's something going on. And I had one say, and I think it started around your generation. I went, hey. But the thing is, as I begin to reflect on this, I think we kind of created this. You know, you remember the first time you heard some preacher or someone say, well, look at all this, look at the shows. The kids are acting like adults, and they show the dads are acting just so silly. Guys, we've been saying that now, if you think about it, for like a few decades. That's been going on at least 20 years. That's old. I'm trying to be careful with little ears. Look what we've done to young girls, and we're trying to get them to grow up and act like they're married young girls with all this experience in the world, and they don't have a clue, and they shouldn't have a clue. Who are you going to put that on? Oh, all the kids were asking for it. No, the adults were the ones that were setting the stage. We're the ones that have done this. We'll get into political messes, and it's just heartening to me that we'll see the media, and I'm saying either side, no matter where you're at. And they'll go to a 17, 18-year-old. What do you say? I'm like, why are you putting that on them? Why are you putting that on them? Who's the adult here? Who's the rock? So, for those of us with kids, can we be the adults? Can we be the rock? And let them be youthful? Let's not put that on them. And let's actually encourage them in the areas where they can grow and they can be wise at a young age. Just a thought. And then, of course, in all of this, it's like, be careful not to provoke them to anger. Neglecting all these things instills this sorrow and this grief. I love these Proverbs. One of them is Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. It says, the purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. I love that. Let me read that one more time. The purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. Go back to Proverbs 18, verse 4. The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a bubbling brook. I'm not against counselors. I've gone to counselors and I've been helped by them. And also, there are very specific things in this life that happen that I don't know that the Bible addresses. You meet someone and they're schizophrenic, and you're like, oh, don't worry, you just go to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 3. I'm like, no, I don't think so, okay? But then there are other realms where we're needing help, where our young people are angry or they've got sorrow, vexation. And sometimes, and brother, and I love it, I don't have anyone in mind, but I'm just saying, I've seen this, we are lacking what we should have had, which is the ability to look at young men and women, older men and women, to look at young men and women and say, there's something deep in there, and I'm going to help you draw it out. Because God has blessed us with time and ability, and He's blessed us with some depth as well. Listen, it doesn't matter if you're a parent or not. If you're older and you've got wisdom behind you, would you help our young people? I am so blessed to know that in times of life, whenever maybe Jordan and I just aren't going to be the people, that they're going to have a family around them. God is so good in how He's designed everything. For our youth, there's one man, he had this quote. He says, they see the roses but do not discover the thorns until pierced by them. So here's the thing. Sometimes, though, this sorrow, this anger, this vexation, they are self-inflicted wounds. Okay? I totally understand that the only person that lived this life perfectly is Jesus Christ. I understand that many times, all of us did not listen to God, and we learned a lesson the hard way. Would all the adults agree with me on that one? But would you throw me a bone, help me out here for a moment, and also back me up on this? But that doesn't mean that that's the wise way to go about it. We still want to learn from what others are telling us without making these mistakes. I'm sorry if I make you uncomfortable, but I only share this stuff to level with you. I remember seeing a counselor. The first time I saw a counselor was when I was younger. My parents had divorced. And then I saw a counselor again when I was around 18 years old. And there was a lot of vexation and sorrow. And I was invited to a group counseling session. And I'm going around and I'm hearing these adults. They were actually a lot older. I was the youngest one in there. And they were confessing all the sin is what it was. And I'll admit, I just broke down in tears. Because my problem is that I did not follow and remember my Creator in the days of my youth. I did not follow what I knew to be right. And I was drowning in sin. And that day, at least, I never went back because I realized I've not repented of my sin. Don't do that. Listen, you're creating habits right now. And if you're like everyone else, you got good habits and you got bad habits. Here's the positive side of that. The longer you practice a good habit, praise God, it's harder to break. But here's the flip side of that. The longer you play in Satan's playground, it is harder to break that habit. So friend, be wise. So do you need to remove anything? Don't be prideful, and don't be afraid to let someone know what it is. Parents, you should be the first ones that know that. I think I should be able to say that. You should be the first ones to know that. But if we can help you, we want to know. All right. So remember also your Creator. Listen, we're going to rejoice, we're going to remove, but we're going to remember. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. For our younger people. So remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come. The King James, New King James translates it the difficult days. And as you continue to read on, what you're finding is this picture, the symbolic picture of this person who's getting old. Okay, it's brutal. I saw a little experiment, and it had kids all the way from their 20s up to people through their 60s, okay? And they were asking them, trying to figure out which decade was the happiest. Now, I don't know if this would prove true every single time. Anyone want to guess what the happiest decade was? 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s? 20s. 40s was the worst. Apparently your world, sorry, if you're in your 40s, we'll be praying for you. 40s is the worst. Because apparently everything's just coming down. Kids are going crazy. You got bills. You're just like, ah! But in your 20s, you're just like the world's ahead of you. I mean, it's yours for the taking. And then when you're in your 60s, apparently, you're coming in second. They're like, I'm done with this rat race. But the thing is, I think as it keeps going on, then the body's like, yeah, I'm done with this rat race too. And you're like, well, hold on a little bit. And you start to feel that, okay? And essentially that's what the teacher's saying. It's coming and it ain't pretty, right? So he says, so remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. The idea is to be mindful or recall. But this is more than just saying, yeah, I know, I recall what God would have me to be or who He wants me to be. It's like, no, do it with the intention of actually acting on it, right? Remember Him. Have this mindset, and you're going to have God with you in every aspect of life. When I first was putting this sermon together, I was thinking something very specific. What do I want to talk about? Dating, marriage. We want to talk about issues of pornography. What do we want to talk about here? Work. What? And then I realized we're going to hit a principle here. Because if you get this principle right, here's the thing. Be sober-minded. You get the principle right, and God's going to be with you in every area of your life. You get the principle right, you get the mindset right, and you don't have to look back on these days with a woulda, coulda, shoulda. But you can look back and go, it was a wonderful time, and God guided me through it, which is a question that I have. Do you right now remember your Creator in the days of your youth? A very simple question. How so? How so? Listen, you should have mom and dad going, hey, what is this that you rejoice in? Okay, so here's the deal. Good thoughts, good ideas here, but that may require this much time, or if you get older, that will require this much of time away from your family or your wife or your kiddos. You know, we need to be thinking about those things, but you do that. Like, you need to start doing that. What about you? How do you do that? What I mean is, like, do you pray to God about these things? Do you go to His Word about these things? God, I'm thinking, but I know I'm young, and I can't understand everything with complete depthness, but I do understand some things, and I'm going to you. Because here's the thing. If you're just enjoying your youth, right, and you can't see God in your pages of life, then you're not doing what the teacher was talking about. He's not just saying, hey, have fun. He's saying, go get them with God. So that's one of the questions that I have for you. How are you doing that? And then finally, for our parents, I really appreciate your attention this morning. I want to close with Solomon's, or the teacher's words here. Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Begin in verse 7. This is to everyone. Go, eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved of what you do. Let your garments always be always white. Let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life that He's given you under the sun, because this is your portion in life and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for there's no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going. And then if you turn the page over to chapter 12 as he concludes his thoughts, I'm in verse 11. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings that are given by one shepherd. Goads are something that you would use to poke the animal, right? You weren't trying to hurt the animal. It hurt a little bit, but it was getting the animal in the right direction. It's actually there to help them. You know, sometimes it's hard to hear things, but God's just trying to help you. Verse 12, my son, beware of anything beyond these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. I really admire, and I mean this isn't me just throwing out honey. I admire those who are older and who have put God in their life. I think you have learned what Solomon concluded, which is trying to figure everything out is going to be wearisome, and you're not going to do it. So what do? You give it to the Lord, and you trust in Him. God bless you for trusting the Lord with your children. God bless you for trusting the Lord with your lives. Your life is not over. You may not be a youth anymore, but enjoy life. It is given to you by God. The end of the matter has been heard. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. You know me, every single time we talk about this fear, I like to give a context of this. This is not a trembling fear. This is a reverent fear. I'm afraid we've quoted this too many times with the wrong idea. Fear God and keep His commandments. Reverence God and keep His commandments. That is the whole of the whole thing. That's the sum of it. And so for those who are not in their youth, don't fear but fear. You know what I mean? And you get on with it as well. Enjoy God's blessings.